There was a time when I had deep conviction in my evangelical beliefs. Then there came a time when I lost them. Over the years, I lost confidence in much of what I'd been taught. And when that footing gave way, I went looking elsewhere. I ended up looking to science, hoping to find answers, real answers. So I read, questioned, argued with myself, turned things over and over in my head, looked again, and kept looking. But I never found an answer in science. Instead, I found a cell. I've known since high school biology that even the simplest living cells were complex. But what I was reading from science was telling me that chemistry could explain how the first living cells formed. Eventually. But I started looking at just how complicated living cells really are. It's a lot more than just chemistry. In fact, the real story isn't chemistry at all. It's mechanism. A living cell is a mechanism made of smaller mechanisms. Membranes regulate traffic. Sensors detect change. Repair systems fix damage. Molecular machines move cargo. Energy systems keep everything running. ATP, the energy source that all living cells run on, are manufactured by rotary motors inside every living cell. No joke, a motor. And what struck me wasn't any single feature. It was all of them together. Dozens of mechanisms working together toward a function. And when I encounter things like that, I know what to call them. Engineered. So yes, like all matter, cells are chemistry. And chemistry can do remarkable things. It can make molecules, produce reactions, generate patterns. No argument there. But a living cell is not merely a pattern. It regulates, repairs, responds, maintains boundaries, produces energy, manages resources, reproduces itself. The deeper I looked, the more difficult it became for me to look at all of that and believe that a living cell was the product of random chemistry. For starters, random chemical reactions do not have an unlimited amount of time to deliver that first living cell. Chemistry gets much shorter windows of opportunity. Chemistry doesn't have the advantage of natural selection. That is limited to things that are already alive. Things that are alive reproduce. If a random mutation occurs in life that helps the organism, that organism can pass it on. If something hurts the organism, it may not live to reproduce. It can't pass it on. With chemistry, it's all or nothing. If a tide pool changes, a pond dries out, a hydrothermal vent shifts, or a chemical gradient collapses, that's it. Whatever chemical development was going on is wiped out. Start over, full stop. You either get a living cell or you start again. So if random chemical reactions are going to produce the first living cell, it's got a lot of work to do. Not some of it, all of it. Boundaries, energy production, energy management, molecular machinery, control systems, coordination, replication. But we're not done. There is something even stranger. The cell isn't just machinery. The machinery runs on information, and that stopped me. Mechanisms impressed me. Information stopped me. Those instructions are carried by DNA, and DNA is chemistry. Of course it is. Atoms, molecules, bonds, reactions, no argument. But for me, DNA being chemistry isn't the point. The point is what the chemistry is doing. A sequence is stored. That sequence is read. That sequence is interpreted. That sequence is translated. And different sequences produce different outcomes. But the order matters. The information matters. That's why biologists use words like information, encoding, transcription, translation, and decoding. Those aren't poetic words. They're descriptive words. It's what DNA does. Suppose you're walking along a deserted beach and you find a book. You don't know the language. You don't know the author. You don't know when it was written. And you can't read a single word. Would you conclude that chemistry wrote the book? Of course not. You would immediately infer a mind. Not because you know whose mind, but because books come from minds. Information comes from minds, and DNA is an information system, and that is where the evidence leads. There is a proposed material explanation, and I'd never heard of it. It's called RNA World. RNA World is an attempt to explain how life might have existed before DNA-based life. RNA can store information. RNA can also perform some chemical functions, so perhaps RNA came first. Maybe. But notice what hasn't disappeared. Information. RNA World simplifies the mechanism. It does not eliminate the information. And you end up with a smaller information system, but it's still an information system. And now another step has been added. RNA has to arise, store information, replicate, persist, and eventually become DNA-based life. All inside the time from when the Earth cools enough for the chemistry to happen and the time we have evidence of life. That didn't remove the problem. It just moved the problem. Because geologically speaking, life appears surprisingly early. Whatever happened, it happened quickly. Chemistry doesn't get unlimited time, and every additional step costs time. RNA World adds a step. It doesn't remove one. And by this point, I found myself hitting a wall. Not a scientific wall, a wall of incredulity. I simply couldn't persuade myself that random chemistry had produced what I was seeing. Then I encountered Francis Crick. Crick was one of the scientists who discovered the structure of DNA. He wasn't a Christian. He wasn't trying to make a theological point. Yet he wrote, "An honest man, armed with all the knowledge available to us now, could only state that in some sense, the origin of life appears at the moment to be almost a miracle." Not because Crick believed in miracles, he didn't, but because he understood the magnitude of the problem. Then I encountered Richard Lewontin. Lewontin was one of the most influential evolutionary biologists of the 20th century, and he wrote this: "We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. We are forced by our prior adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door." I read that, and suddenly a great deal of things made sense. When I look at the nature of the cell, and when I understand the informational nature of DNA, it's plain to me that searching for a random chemical explanation is simply not following the inference to the best explanation. In fact, it's avoiding it. This is not like dark matter or something. With dark matter, we observe effects we can't explain, and no one knows what dark matter is, so scientists look. And that makes sense to me. You follow the evidence wherever it leads. And this isn't that. When I look at a cell and see the mechanisms, when I look at DNA and see information, in every other context I know, we are looking at a mind at work, an engineer, a coder. This is where the evidence leads. But philosophical materialism, not science, excludes what is, to me, obvious. The philosophical materialist has to go around the obvious and search for a material explanation instead, no matter how difficult, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how far removed from ordinary experience. So yes, I think there is an agent behind life, an engineer, a coder, a mind. That's where I landed. Do you see it differently? Do you really think that random chemical reactions can produce what we actually see? Let me know in the comments. Hey, if you know what's good for me, you'll press that like button and subscribe. And leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Check us out next time.